We are to give thanks to God for his redemption. I think possibly my favorite summary of the gospel. We are to give thanks, Paul says, starting in verse 12, giving thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of the saints in light. He has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. He's thanking the Father who has qualified us to share in the inheritance of his Son. Again, we do not make ourselves qualified. We do not make ourselves good enough or right enough or pretty enough to be qualified to share in the inheritance of the Son. It's something we receive by grace. It's something we receive despite how gross our sin is, how offensive our sin is. You see, we all go our own way. We reject the Creator. We do not acknowledge him. We do not thank him. We do not love him. And yet still, he loves us. He still pursues us and qualifies us to enjoy an inheritance that is above and beyond anything we could ever deserve. He qualifies us. Notice there, it's all the saints qualified for the same inheritance. This is one of the great truths that we're going to look at more as we get later into the book of Colossians, but it doesn't matter our social status, it doesn't matter our class, our race, our background, our gender. We all share the same inheritance. We're all called to an equal portion of God's inheritance by grace, as we are all under his one headship and kingship. Let's look at verse 13. This is a beautiful transfer. He has delivered us from the domain of darkness and into the kingdom of his beloved Son. He's delivered us from the domain of darkness. Now here, darkness is a metaphor for sin and rebellion and death. We were all living in darkness. We all, by nature, are citizens of the domain of darkness. And as citizens of the domain of darkness, as sinners, sin and death have authority over us. They have power over us. When we live in their domain, they have dominion over us. Sin is our master while we are living in darkness. We were in darkness, apart from God, rebelling against God, resisting God, and worthy of God's wrath, deserving of God's wrath. You see, apart from Christ, we have darkened hearts that no longer acknowledge God. We have darkened desires that no longer love God as we were created to, but we love this world. We have darkened minds that can no longer discern good and evil. We all were without hope until the Son came, and he delivered us into the kingdom that belongs to him. Now, this is what's really amazing with this passage. We get to share in the inheritance of the kingdom of the Son because the Son died for us. That's the beauty of the gospel. We get to share in the Son's kingdom because the Son died for us. He entered into our domain of darkness as a shining light. He came as the light of the world to expose our sin. He came to expose our darkness. We wouldn't realize we're in the darkness unless his light had come and shone in it. And as he walked and taught, he exposed the darkness. And those who live in that darkness didn't like it. They hated the Creator who was coming to shine light in the darkness. And so they thought, they planned to quench that light. They killed him. The most amazing thing was that was his plan all along. The light came down into the darkness to die in that darkness, to free us from that darkness. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, he came, took upon himself a perfect nature, human nature, but without sin, without darkness, being perfect light. And he died for all of us who believe in him who were in the darkness. That's the beauty of the gospel. You see, our darkness was enslaving us. our darkness was going to end with our death and our destruction unless someone took our place. In the light of the world, he came to be just like us, except for sin, and he took our place. He took our place under the wrath of God so that we can have forgiveness of sins. He took our place as if darkness to free us from our enslavement. And now, as the pastor says, we have forgiveness of sins and we have redemption. This is a loaded term if you're a Hebrew. Redemption points back to the exodus of Israel, when they were freed from the enslavement of Egypt and brought into the promised land. Our redemption, our exodus is so much better because we are taken out of slavery to sin and into the freedom of Christ. We're taken out of death and given life. We are taken out of a life that was bound to sin and we're given godliness. We're taken out of cynicism and we're given joy. We are out from under the rule of sin that would destroy us. We are put under the kingship of Christ, who loves us and gives us life.